The novel is on a primary level, a novel, of course, about brotherhood. It's a family drama. I like to say that the works of fiction that I most enjoy should lend itself to at least three levels of interpretation. And the first should be the personal one, which is the fact that the fisherman is, a family drama, a novel about sibling, but rivalry and love and bond and all of that. So that on the primary level was intended to be Cain and Abel-like, but I think the heart of the novel is in fact the love between those brothers, as shown in the novel. I like to call the fisherman a kind of Igbo version of, or African kind of tragedy, if I should say that. So it borrows elements from both. So the works that shaped my understanding of what literature is, or what fiction is, were mostly Grecian and Shakespearean works. So I came to writing, of course, through reading. And when I started to read, I read most of the things in my dad's, on my dad's shelf. So that shaped my understanding of the aesthetics of fiction. But also, I was also told a lot of tales about old Igbo people and heroes and all of those things. And I could see very early on the similarities that both, forms of storytelling share. And there are not very many differences between them. And so I think that my work is it's a kind of tragic form of fiction that is both European and African at the same time, so it's hard to describe. The idea of whether or not we are in control of our lives has been a very primal question from the inception of humanity, I think. And I think even though now the world, the Western world, for example, has gone very, very secular, I think people still believe in some of these things, but more so in Africa than anywhere else, I suppose. But when I conceived The Fisherman, I happened to have moved from Nigeria to Cyprus to go to college. And I became very homesick. So I like to say that the novel was inspired by nostalgia, but it was driven by all kinds of emotions. So at the time I was conceiving it, I had just had, or the day it was conceived, I had just had this phone call from my dad where he was talking about the increasing closeness between my two oldest brothers, who are Irish twins. So they were born technically in the same year, one in January, one in November. And so when they were kids, they used to have a lot of rivalry. But now they were almost into their 30s and they were getting along so well that my dad was just like talking about it, how exciting, how miraculous, that they now have transcended that period of animosity. So once the call ended, I began to think about brotherhood in a different light. What is it that makes a person special to me and unique just because I believe that, we're from the same source? So and then I started to think, okay, how about I can use a family unit as a metaphor for any kind of entity at all. So what is it that can come from the outside and destroy the unity of an entity? And then I had read somewhere that a civilization cannot be destroyed from the outside. It has to be helped from within. So I started to think, okay, if we have a band of brothers, what can turn that love to hate? And so I came up with this idea of the madman as a final solution, who has this power of prophecy, given that in Africa we believe so much in these things. So, and so we see in the novel how gradually and painfully love gradually becomes hate because of the force of the prophecy. So the madman is essentially this figure who just plants that seed, but the destruction itself is helped from within. So the idea of somebody who is not completely in the world, but not outside of it either, I think is something I got from ancient Igbo tales. They've been those figures, but on the very basic level, and by Igbo I mean the tribe in Nigeria where I'm from. Uh, in the Igbo imagination, there is no difference between the world of the living and the supernatural and the dead. So it is a peculiar African worldview that we converse, everything we do is preordained. There are no coincidences. So, we relate every day. Our actions are controlled by supernatural forces that are beyond the realm of what we can be privy to. So, in that sense, it'll be very plausible in an African setting to have someone like the madman who can easily have access to the future, that people cannot. So he probably is seen by the people of this town as someone who has tapped deeper on a more deeper level into that supernatural world. But everyone believes that it exists, There's no question about that. So in many ways, he's eccentric, granted, but he's not completely unusual from. So by this I mean that even though he's fictional, but I believe that something like this can happen or probably has happened somewhere in Nigeria. So the novel is constructed in a way that it's like a profile of every character, but yet it tells the story still. The story flows in an almost linear way. So the father is a character in the novel to whom a chapter is devoted. So he is in many ways eccentric. He probably has deeper dimensionalities to him, but on the basic level of the novel, I think that he is this character who, he's a figure who tries to control things, but also he is himself not in control of things. So he wants to, but he's not in control. So he leaves home, and it is in his it is in the vacuum that is created that whatever happens to the boys happens. I think that if he never left home, they probably would still have been, all of the boys complete. But so he's the ego, the character of the ego that is attached to him, I think in many ways defines his personality and his character. So the eagle is the strongest of birds. He's formidable in every way. But he goes to hunt, and then by the time he returns, most of the times the children, if he doesn't get enough meat to supply to the very hungry and meat-needing eaglets, they end up killing each other, siblings killing each other. And it's so there's a phenomenon called the Cain and Abel syndrome in the animal world. So it is the same thing that happens in the novel. So the father leaves, even though he is this formidable guy who wants to go and provide for the kids. And by the time he returns, he meets disaster. So he's in many ways weak, even though he shows himself or portrays himself as being strong. I think that the character of the father as one who wants his kids to aspire to greater things is very, it's not necessarily unique in that instance. You know, there's this thing we say in West Africa that parents will always say, okay, if I've reached this point in my life, I want my children to exceed it. So parents always aspire that the children will do more. So that is what, you know, what he aims for there. But as a larger symbol of something, I think that he can be seen as in many ways as this character who aims, I think, for a more, let's say, progressive, country. So one of the ways that my novel, I hope, should be read is that it is a metaphor for Nigeria, for the paradox that is Nigeria. So the fact that despite all of the resources we have, we are not a rich country at all. There's a lot of poverty there. But the argument that the book makes in some ways is that prior to colonial incursion into African lands, even though we did not have technological advancement and some of these sophistications, West Africa was stable. There wasn't privation as we have now. Everybody subsisted from their farmlands. They were, and things in many ways were good for many people, as opposed to now where a few has and there are a lot of have-nots. So the novel is a question of, kind of explores the question of why are we where we are today. So and then it argues for, okay, now that we have Western civilization, we have to either pursue that to the letter or abandon it completely. So the choice will most probably be to pursue Western civilization to the letter. Right now we mix both, and so it's not working. So it's corrupted form of Western culture that we have in Nigeria. So the father is a character who espouses complete Western, culture, and so he aspires for the education, and in fact denigrates fishing, for example, which used to be a respected African career path, pre-colonial. Just like the river in the novel is seen now as a very bad and forbidden thing. So once the colonial people came, the orientation or reorientation of the Africans was so thorough that everything African now is seen by the Africans themselves as, inferior and outdated. And so the father has, I think, in many ways, that view. Language in colonial contraptions like Nigeria is almost always at least bilingual. So when someone is born into that kind of society, you acquire, at least at conception, two languages. And like myself and the boys in the novel, they are Igbo, but they are born, so from the east of Nigeria, but they are born and live in the west of Nigeria, where Yoruba is spoken. So once they were conceived, they had three languages. They acquired three languages simultaneously. So what now happens is that, given that English is a national language, it is foreign language. It is a language attached to Nigeria, which is also a foreign idea. What happens is that people tend to compartmentalize these languages. So they navigate seamlessly between them. So, but they ascribe certain qualities and certain effects to the languages. So, for instance, in the novel, English is a language in which you conversed with foreigners. You know, it's not a language of geniality. So, and when the parents of these boys become angry with them, they switch from Igbo to English because English has its, since it's a foreign language, it has a way of like distancing you from the person to whom you're speaking with. So that's a very interesting. So we tend to distribute these languages into various uses. The question of writing about a place I live in is almost, in fiction, almost never occurs to me because I think that to be able to effectively capture a place concretely, you have to actually be away from it. The fishermen, for example, as I said before, would not have been written if I weren't outside of Nigeria. The reason being because it was inspired by nostalgia. So when I went to Cyprus, something remarkable, like an epiphany, happened. So I come from a very large family of 12 kids, and I had always known that there was something unusual and unique about my family. Even in Nigeria, it's regarded as enormous, and that I would one day write about it. But it wasn't until I left for home that I discovered that I did not have a friend. It had not occurred to me that I needed to have a friend because we were so self-sufficient. There were, everybody in the house, were my friends. So we could play soccer and we would be enough kids to play. So we never needed people from the outside. So if I were living in Nigeria, I would not have missed my siblings so much. When I left Nigeria, then I discovered their worth. How much close I had been with these guys that I didn't even realize it until then. So that's one thing. So, but now that I live in the US, and I have just completed the first draft of or two drafts of the second novel. It is definitely not set in the US. It is set now in Nigeria and Cyprus, the places that I have left. So I cannot really write about a place that I live in fiction. Akure is a very, is a city where I was born. And in the 90s, it was very auspicious. We believed that it would grow, and it was growing. It's not very far from Lagos, in the west of Nigeria. It is probably 4 hours or 3 hours drive from Lagos. So at the time, it is said to be one of the oldest cities, with zinc roofs and these colonial, roofing sheets. So when it's a very flat place, except for some parts of on the outskirts of the city that with some kind of hills. When I was growing up, I had this personal connection mostly to the the Omiala River, just mostly because of the mythologies around it. So at the time, or in pre-colonial times, people believed a lot in mermaids, Eyemoja, so some goddess who lived in this river. And Akure, as the map in my novel shows, is crisscrossed by this river. So I would always wish that I can see this figure who is part human, part fish. So in many ways, it did help my imagination, because when I would think and imagine encounters with these, figures, these supernatural creatures. My imagination would just go run wild. But I think in terms of development, in recent times, it has in many ways been stagnant. I last visited the city in 2014, and there wasn't much change, in there. Although there used to be this very big market that features in my book, very open market, a bazaar. So the government of the day has, destroyed it. That is too local. So they have built something, a gated place that is like a mall, something, because they feel like that is the more modernized version of a market. So there's been some changes, but very little. There's something they say that when a writer sets out to write a first novel, that you tend to write what you know. I think in many ways there's some truth to that, but fiction itself is a very moldable form. I think it's the most untrammeled form of art, really, that there is. I mean, this is contentious. People can argue that it's in fact not true, but you can do anything with fiction. So what I suppose that fiction writers do is that they take figments of reality, even when in fact they take reality, but they mold it in such a way that it becomes unrecognizable to even the person about whom they're writing, supposedly, if they're writing about someone, in fact. So that is what fiction to me is. I think it's nearly impossible to import and make things completely new. That said, I would say that this is probably 85% fiction. There are two characters that are close to being true to life here, and one of them is the city or the town of Akure. It is replicated in the novel as I remember it in the 90s. The other is the eccentric character of the father. Let's say that is like 50%. It has 50% qualities of my dad. Even then, most of those are exaggerated. But my dad was this guy who he grew up alone, basically. So he had sisters, but they were very poor. That his sisters, when he was 10, they got married at like 14, 15, so that they could marry rich men who will now help the only boy in the house go to school. So it was like this very interesting thing. So he grew up alone, nobody to talk to, nobody to play with, just his old mother. So he vowed that if he had the means, he was going to create a clan from his own body, and that's what he has done. He has 12 children. That's a lot. So in many ways, that is the same with the father of the novel. So aside from those two characters, really really isn't any other character that is from what I know. I mean, there are parts of me in say the character Benjamin. As a little boy, I loved animals. I was fascinated with birds, but that's pretty much it, really.